welcome to this edition of I'm Not Crazy, but with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. I'm Dr. Rhonda Mattox, board certified triple fellowship trained psychiatrist and the host of I'm Not Crazy, but thank you so much for joining us today. As many of you are doing, we are shopping. A lot of us are shopping for Mother's Day gifts, for Mother's Day cards. Some of us are really struggling because there are no Mother's Day cards that express the sentiments that we really have about our mothers. There's nothing out there that says, hey, thank you for not aborting me because you're trying not to lie. And we get it. Hallmark, hear from us. We need some additional cards. For a number of reasons, many of us may be struggling. We may have complicated relationships with our mothers. We may have mothers or children who have gone on to glory, we hope. We may have not become a mother and we desire to be so. Whatever it is, many of us have complicated relationships with Mother's Day. On today's episode of I'm Not Crazy, but we are talking about when Mother's Day is complicated: love, loss, and lessons learned. Thank you all for joining us. You know what to do. Drop where you're calling, where you're signing in from, and let me begin by introducing my all-star cast while you're doing that. We have with us the Dr. Tiffany Haynes, clinical psychologist with expertise in mental health services. She has completed a postdoctoral fellowship and she is doing her thing. She's also the co-founder of Arkansas Faith Network, a coalition of places of worship, healthcare organizations, health researchers. She is also with us also, Dr. And Dr. Andrew Reed is a psychiatrist and the owner of Reed and Health, and the co-founder of Reed and Henderson Health and Wellness. And then we also have with us Miss Jalatifa Joe Myers, who's a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of the school. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now, there were moments when I couldn't see you, but I'm we will go ahead and get into the meat of it. Welcome, ladies. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to get started with the question that many of you already know, and that's, what are some of the reasons that people struggle during Mother's Day? And audience, don't think that you're off of the hook for struggling. Why you're struggling, or the people you know are struggling during Mother's Day. And Dr. Haynes, I'll lead with you. What are some of the reasons that people struggle during Mother's Day?
I think in your intro, you hit it right on the head when you said anybody who doesn't see their relationship that's shown in those Hallmark movies, they may have a complicated relationship with Mother's Day. So that means anyone who is struggling with the loss of the mother, anyone who is struggling with, wanting to have a child and struggling with not being able to do that, anyone who's going through transitions in their mother-daughter or child relationship. So, your child is getting ready to go to college, or this is the first Mother's Day that you've had without your child being there with you. So anytime you go down that greeting card aisle and you don't see your particular mother-child relationship on the cards, you may be having a complicated or struggling with Mother's Day.
I agree as well. I think that right now Dr. Maddox may be having some technical issues, so we'll continue on with the question and answering. But when it comes to reasons for people struggling with Mother's Day, I would say a lot of them are those that may want to be a mother and have tried in various ways to become one, but they have not been able to achieve. And so this day can be very difficult for them.
I would like to add also, I think, one, mothers that are grieving their children that they've lost too soon, as well as mothers that may not have had an opportunity to bond with their child during the first year of life. Oftentimes, if there's something that interrupts that bonding during the first year of life, you may feel like you have a complicated relationship with your mother and not really know why, and have to work harder at that relationship because of that time being interrupted.
Dr. Maddox, can you hear us?
Great points. I will just add to that. Many times people are certainly, we're having storms here, so I may be going in and out a little bit, as you all can well tell. But I'll say sometimes people are estranged from their children, and you may have already outlined that. What are some of the unique challenges that you can anticipate when you are struggling with the loss of your child? Are you
Yeah, I
all
think
able to hear me?
yes, we are. I think that you can anticipate. I think your question was, what challenges can you anticipate when you're dealing with the loss of a child? And I think that you can
Mhm.
anticipate.
With the loss of a child.
And so I think that you can anticipate that there's going to be grief. And when we're talking about grief, we can anticipate those same things that we often see. You may be having moments of tearfulness or sadness. You may have some increased anxiety because you're getting a little bit nervous or overwhelmed. You may also have some time where you just need some space to be alone. You may not feel like wanting to interact with other people. So, those same things that we may be experiencing on a day to day basis, along with grief, we may experience those same things on Mother's Day, and they may just be a little bit more intense on that day than what they would be on another day.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that happens when you are going through this is that it's much more punctuated, because many times people can pretend like it hasn't happened, but during Mother's Day you're bombarded with all of these messages, and those types of things, so that it becomes a lot more challenging. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yes, I would like to add that I do believe the cycle of grief does happen because what you said, all those messages are out there and people expect you to be happy. They're like, what are you doing for Mother's Day? What are your plans? Did your children plan anything? And so, what are the responses when you really don't want to bring your baggage into the conversation, but you're not feeling the same as majority of society is feeling about that day?
Mhm. And the same can be said for children who are being asked, what are you doing for your mother, or what have you. And particularly when you have a complex relationship with your mother, answering the "what are you doing for your mother," and then feeling that pressure to say that you're going to do something spectacular, or forgive her, or she didn't, you know, you only have one mother. And so those types of things, to where it's poor form for you to rattle off all that has happened to you at the hands of your mother or your child, to where you're not there, but yet you feel a little bit anxious about just participating in that conversation. How can we gracefully tell people to mind their own business when they enter into those spaces and we don't want to have those conversations?
You know, I I used to have the thought when
This
I
group is
raised.
entirely too loud to be this quiet. Let me repeat myself. Maybe you didn't hear. How do you gracefully tell people to mind their own business?
When I was raising a child with mental illness, I had to parent differently than a lot of other parents, because I had to navigate her development with the mental illness part. And a lot of times people would say, "Oh, that child needs a spanking," or "That child, you're not strict enough with that child." And I really felt like, please take my card, mind your own business. I got tired of saying it. I just wanted to hand out a card and say, mind your own business. My child needs to be parented differently.
And you know what?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you have to
Go ahead,
worry
Dr.
about
Haynes.
I don't think you have to worry about being graceful with this sometimes. You know, when people say, I'm choosing to celebrate Mother's Day like this, I'm choosing to celebrate by taking some time off. I'm choosing to do this. And I don't have to offer any additional details about why or whatever. My no or my yes stands alone. And I think that we spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out how do we make other people feel comfortable with our answer instead
Mhm.
of focusing on, you know what? I'm just going to make sure I'm comfortable. So when people say, "What are you doing for Mother's Day?" Choosing to do this and smile and we
Hmm. Absolutely. I love it. You don't have to make them feel comfortable. I like it. Dr. Reed, you are smiling, and I know you have something you'd love to, to insert.
Well, I'm a smart aleck. I wanted to tell people exactly what I think that what I want to say. And so, usually, if someone asks me a question about what am I doing for Mother's Day, how am I honoring my mom, and I say the best way I know how, and then I keep it moving.
The best way I know how.
Yeah.
So the best way I know how, hand them a card,
Mhm.
say I'm celebrating in this manner and end the conversation. That that speaks volumes. I like it. I think as we are approaching Mother's Day, there are some people who are celebrating for the very first time without their mother, or without their child. There are a number of people that I know who have had miscarriages or who are doing this for the very first time. What do you say to those individuals?
give yourself the gift of grace for that first Mother's Day. And what that means is honor whatever you feel like doing that day.
Mhm.
Do not. A lot of times we think healing has to look happy, and so we put ourselves out there to smile and do the things, and we don't have to do that. So if you want to lay in the bed on Mother's Day, you have my permission, everybody else's permission on here to lay in the bed on Mother's Day. If you want to eat cake, if you don't want to eat cake, if whatever it is that your mind and your soul and your body is speaking to you and saying this is what you need today, give yourself that gift.
Mhm. I like it. However, just show up and honor that small, still voice that's speaking to you on how to do it best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it. Anyone
Absolutely.
else?
I agree with Dr. Haynes. I think that doing what you feel most comfortable with doing, if that is being around people, okay, go to brunch. If that is having a catered brunch at your house delivered by DoorDash, okay, have your brunch at home by yourself, watching your favorite movie, or not. I mean, I agree that if you want to stay in bed, that's okay. It's okay to just be. I think a lot of times we focus on doing so much that we don't allow ourselves to just sit in what we're experiencing. And I am definitely a person that needs to take my own words into consideration as well, because I will do when it's just okay to sit.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I remember going to church after Mother's Day, and that was probably a solid mistake on my part,
Mhm.
uh, because I made everyone around me uncomfortable. When I tell you I cried ugly tears, my tears were waterfalls. My nose was red, beet red, and I was snotty nose, and I just couldn't, like, I was literally sobbing and could not stop. And so I stopped going for many years. And I remember, and just that was my way of coping, was to avoid and not go. And I remember my husband said to me, "Your daughter didn't lose her mother." It had not occurred to me that in my efforts to avoid that I was actually not allowing my daughter to celebrate me, not allowing anybody around me to celebrate me. How do you balance what's going on with you with the people who remain? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely. For me, and with my thought process, first, you got to take care of yourself. You
Mhm.
got to do what you feel is healing for yourself in those moments. And that might take a couple of years to figure out how to balance that for yourself and not feeling guilty because you're not super mom or super granddaughter or whatever the case may be on a specific day. So I'd say take care of yourself then, and then ask them what they would like to do. And if you feel comfortable with doing that, then do it. And if you want to do something else, then you do something else. It's all in regards to you feeling comfortable and them showing up for you just as if you want to show up for them.
Hmm. I like it. I like it.
And I just want to add, that balance takes time. So
Mm-hmm.
like I said, if it takes 2 or 3 years, 5 years to figure out how you're going to balance it, like that's okay. And you don't have to celebrate Mother's Day on Mother's Day. So if the actual day of Mother's Day is a day where you just need to take care of yourself, that's okay. And if your daughter wants to take you out to brunch a couple of weeks later, you are still being celebrated, and it's okay to be celebrated on another day and not on Mother's Day. So you can make it work for you. It does not have to look like what everybody else is doing on social media, what everyone else is doing on TV. Make it personal and make it fit what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate that, and it's interesting because some many times when you are doing these things, you can have blinders on and not realize how you are showing up in the world. And so it's so nice to hear you all talking about really honoring yourself rather than sacrificing. Um, Setting ourselves on fire and burning up for everybody else to keep them warm. So I appreciate that. What are some strategies to support people who are going through this? So we're talking about what to do for ourselves, but what if you see someone struggling and you want to be a support to them? How do you? What are your recommendations to support those who are obviously struggling?
I think simply asking them what they feel could be helpful to them in that moment is the single best way that I know how to support someone. Because a lot of times the comfort that I desire and in the way that I desire can be very different from what someone else desires. And so asking them if they want to just sit, if they want to go somewhere, if they want to do something in particular, asking them what is comforting is the best in my opinion.
I like that.
I agree
Absolutely.
with that. I lost my mother in 2016, and so Mother's Day is complicated for me.
Mhm.
I have a couple of friends who will just send a text and say, "Hey, thinking of you," and that I don't even talk to them every day. This is not like my best friends. These are people who just know that this is a day and they just send a text, and that is so helpful. But
Yeah.
the best gift I got from my family was that space to process it the way I needed to. So,
Mhm.
in my family, if you don't show up for an event, it's a what you doing, where you been, why you didn't make it. You supposed to be here. But on Mother's Day, when people started doing things, and if you just said, "Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna come," and my dad to say, "I understand this is a difficult day for you. You do whatever you need to do." And that was the best gift he's ever given. Don't tell him that because I like material gifts too. But that's the best gift he's ever given in that time of grief is to say, I'm not going to push you. I'm going to give you that space. So asking them what they need, but also finding ways to give them space and support is going to be important.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Now, audience in there, Latasha and Roz and Mary, I need you all to drop in there what you think are good ideas for supporting someone, and all the rest of you, Kia and Barbara, drop your ideas. You all too quiet in that chat today. Go ahead.
So, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to add to just to know what is meaningful to that individual person. Everyone has a different love language on what they need to feel loved and appreciated, and what they show others. And so, what is meaningful to that mother? When my children ask me what I wanted for Mother's Day, I want all of you to be at peace. That's what I need. And when you are at peace, I feel good. So it's what is meaningful to that person. It doesn't necessarily have to be an action, that something you do because of Mother's Day. It doesn't even have to be something that you give. It can be something that you just are and what you can be.
Mhm. And that is spoken as someone who is healthy and well. I appreciate I appreciate that. Dr. Reed, and what were you about to say?
Well, I think that as this show title is today, it's complicated.
Mhm.
As Dr. Haynes mentioned, her mother has passed. My mother's been gone for about 10 years now, and it feels different every year. Sometimes it can be a sneak attack. And Dr. Maddox, we talked about it last week in regards to the conversation we're going to have today. And I legitimately didn't even understand what complicated feelings and depression and anxiety that I was experiencing for the past week and where that came up from. And I am 100% sure it was because my body knew that Mother's Day was coming up, even though I was not cognitively thinking about it. And so I think in the moment, comfort and what a person needs can change. It can change from year to year, it can change from week to week. And sometimes that person doesn't even know. Like last week, I didn't know what I needed. I just knew I wanted to cry. And so I allowed myself that time.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because, as you said, it can sneak up on you. Last week, I was very intentional about having a light episode. And so it was a fun episode. And then 30 minutes later, I was literally bawling because I was thinking, oh my gosh, my mother never got to meet my daughter. Right. And so and I had scheduled all of these Mother's Day episodes. And I was thinking, I cannot do another Mother's Day episode. I'm done with this. And I had to, realize this is not a unique experience that you're having. You're special, but this is something that many people are struggling with. And so let's bring this to the table and talk about it, because many times we will put on our happy faces and just try to plow forward and look the part. And I am just authentically me. And I really believe in bringing all of me to a space and giving people permission to feel however they feel, and not to say you should feel, certainly I want to bring gratitude whenever I'm coming. And I'm thankful to have had someone in my life who loved me just unconditionally, and yet miss them and bring all of that and give you all permission. And the thing about it is, many times we will say, we will people will say you should be over this by now.
Mm.
And I think that is a really unwise and ill-informed statement to make, even if you think it. But that is an unwise and ill-informed statement. And while you may be well intentioned or well meaning, uh, the comments that people will say to you after something has happened can really catch you off guard. I actually don't even remember how long my mom has been gone now. I think it's been, maybe 15 to 20 years. And yet that does not, now I can smile and not cry every time I think about her, but it doesn't take the pain away. But then I'm also reminded of people who did not have the benefit of having years of a mother that they perhaps appreciated, because we have people who are listening on who perhaps, their mother, they feel like their mother chose a man over them, or all of Tyler Perry's movies that you guys just think came out of thin air didn't come out of thin air. There are people who have lived the lives of being prostituted out by their mothers for drugs and for those kinds of things. And so, just pivoting a little bit to the people who have very complicated relationships with their mothers, and many times, those individuals are waiting on an apology that is not going to happen. What do you say to the person who has staked their ability to move forward and walk in forgiveness and let it go on an apology that truthfully they may never get?
Be real with them and tell them, girl, that ain't gonna happen. It's not okay. You can write the apology to yourself that you want. You can do that. You can tell that person who is hurting as if, so you can act as if you are not you, that you're a third person, and you're writing a letter to them apologizing the way you want to hear it. I think that's going to be the most comforting that I can think of at this time, because it hurts to want something that you know good and well it ain't gonna happen, you know.
Mm,
But you can comfort yourself, and if you
mm,
can't, you can cry, and that's okay too.
mhm. Absolutely.
I also think when you have those complicated relationships between a mother and daughter or a son and a mother, where there's been some type of abuse or some type of trauma that has interrupted their bond, especially as they get older and are adults, um, both people, the child and the mother, need to take care of themselves first. Like they
Mhm,
need to honor, I did the best that I could at that time, and I'm sorry if it wasn't enough. But honor that they love their child, even though they didn't make the best choices.
Yeah.
mhm. And I love what both of you are saying, and I will say, respect the process. Many times people have done years of damage, and after they have transformed, after they're no longer drinking and they're sober, or immediately after they have found God, they are ready to now initiate this relationship, and they are not well received.
Mm-hmm.
Or not rapidly received enough. Respect the process, and don't try to force it to happen when it's not time. You might process with a therapist or with someone else as you are navigating what you desire. But I really appreciate what both of you have said. Dr. Haynes, do you want to weigh in?
I think I agree with everything you say. And when I think about that, I think about if I broke my leg, I wouldn't wait on someone else to give me permission to go and get the help I need or the support I need or what I need to do for my leg to get better. And so I can't wait on others to give me that apology if I know it's not coming. I have to take those steps to comfort myself and apologize to myself because I'm delaying my healing because I'm waiting on something from someone else that they don't have the capacity to give, or they may not have the capacity to give. And so I think sometimes we have to just remind ourselves that everyone's not going to be able to give us what we need. And we have to figure out how we're going to get those needs met, even if it's not going to come through the person that we really want it to come through. And then also, as a person who has the privilege of saying I did have a good relationship with my mom, I have to be very mindful about not projecting that on other people's process.
Yeah.
And so when I see people who are like, "Oh, I got to go home for Mother's Day," and for me, it triggers me. I'm like, I wish I had one more time to go with my mama. Y'all better go. And I have to be really careful that I'm not projecting my feelings on someone else's process and giving them the space to process that too. So sometimes in our grief, we forget that other people didn't have that same relationship and they're not grieving the same way we do, and we try to kind of make them grieve like us, and that's not their story, their testimony, and we have to be mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
I just need you to put that on repeat and replay that like 17,000 more times, because that is so necessary. So many people who have, and it isn't even, sometimes they're health relationships, but sometimes they're just decent relationships, cannot grasp what someone else is saying. And I remember someone saying that their mother told them they did the best that they could. And they said, no, you didn't. And the person said, I was a good mother to you. And they said, no, you weren't. And that can sound disrespectful depending on your religious background or whatever. But that person was being authentic and speaking their truth. And they, said, I know you're going to think, no, you don't know what I'm going to think. What I'm thinking is that this was a courageous act. And, not saying it, loud or obnoxious, but really standing in, no, you were not a good mother to me. And no, you did not do the best that you could have. You could have done better. And, and I imagine myself saying that to my mother. And I didn't know how that would have gone, but I could respect that conversation was being had. I could respect that conversation was being had.
Yeah. I just want to highlight something Dr. Haynes said about capacity. I think that is really important, that not everyone has the capacity to love you in the way that you need to be loved.
Mhm.
And if they don't have the capacity, we can't really blame them for not loving us in the way that we need it to be loved, because it is about their capacity, right?
Mhm.
And so I think when we think about that in that way, we stop looking for apologies or expecting some extraordinary act from this person who you want more from. And there's nothing more to squeeze out. There's nothing more to squeeze out of that container, um, because they don't have the capacity to give it.
Yeah.
And so I, I, I think it's important to think about the person's capacity that you're expecting
And
love
I will
from.
say, I struggled a bit to hear you, and I'm not sure if the rest of the audience did. Um, so my apologies for not offering commentary immediately. Can you still hear me? And because I know you, I'm sure they were excellent statements. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yes, if you know me, I use a lot of analogies, and in regards to capacity, I like to relate it to cars. You know, if you think about it, an '87 Bronco is not going to go this fast as a 2014, I mean 2023 or 24 Corvette. It's not going to go as fast as a C8. So you can expect that person or that car to do what you want another car or a person to do. And once you can see that and kind of feel that, they just don't have it, and recognize it's okay and keep it moving.
I think we lost Dr. Maddox again.
Oh, thanks.
But I agree with your capacity statement, and I think that's a hard thing to do when we're talking about mother-child relationships, because society has made motherhood look like everybody has should have the capacity to do motherhood the way that we see it in the movies. And
Yeah.
so when we have a complicated relationship with the mother, it's hard to have those conversations and hard to see them as not having the capacity, because we feel like it should just be something that turns on for you so that
Mhm.
you get it and and that's not really what happens. And so extending that level of grace of and understanding that you didn't have the capacity, and extending that a level of grace and say, you know what, I did not have the relationship with my mother the way that I wanted to, but here's what I'm going to do now to show that comfort and love to myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. Excellent, excellent points. Not having capacity and recognizing that. How do we recognize that someone does not have the capacity? What does it look like? Give us some clues.
A lot of times it can look like asking for something over and over and not getting it from that person. And you feel like, I am hitting my head against the wall. I don't understand why they don't get what I want. I done told them, da 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 da. I think that is a level of maybe you understanding the capacity of what you desire, because that could be too much, or the capacity that that person can provide you. And so I think that could be a good understanding of it. Also, if a person tells you, I cannot do that, I cannot do it. And I think that is an easy way to recognize that
Mhm.
they don't have the capacity. Or if they say, I don't know how, because that frequently is a statement of, I don't know how to do what you want me to do.
Mhm. That's good. I can't. And the thing about it is, many times people without capacity struggle to communicate that they don't have the capacity with
Mhm.
words. And so you have to be in tune with the actions and not and just understand that you can't get blood from a turnip is something I grew up hearing, and many times we are not recognizing that we can't get blood from a turnip if they don't have the capacity. Many people are parenting from unparented spaces,
Mhm.
and that is a challenge. I remember uh, my growing up. I probably look back on my childhood in a way that is it where I'm fantasizing about some of it and it's all not true. But I had a really good time because I had so many cousins. And I remember like my grandfather like falling out, falling down or whatever. And I was laughing. Now he was intoxicated. And I remember looking at my mom's face and she was not a bit amused at that. But as a kid, that was funny to me. And later I would learn that my grandfather struggled with sobriety, and it was and that created a lot of issues for the children that he was raising. Mm-hmm. And so we don't always get the relationship that they had, but I'm thankful that she allowed me to have a relationship with my grandfather because I have nothing but fond memories with him. And yet my mother had very tough times. Sometimes people don't have good relationships with their parents because the parents had bad relationships with perhaps each other, and now they are hindering the other parent from being involved. And so there are people, mothers who want to be involved with their kids, or fathers who want to be involved with their kids, and the other parent is, for whatever reason, hindering that. Can you speak to how to navigate those unique challenges when it's not about your capacity, but it's about someone else asserting themselves and not allowing you to have the relationship that you desire to have, and perhaps even poisoning your children against you? Well, and my apologies because that was not on the list of questions I intended to ask you, but it seems very relevant because I hear this so frequently.
Yeah. I think parenting is a growth process. So, I'm a mother of 5. And so I often tell my eldest that I was,
Are you all able?
Okay. Huh? So I often tell my eldest that,
Continue.
She was my practice child, right? Because I had never parented before. And so as, I grew as
Can you all hear?
And as a parent, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, as I grew as an adult and as a parent, my parenting changed because when you know better, you do better, right? And so it's a growth process. People can interfere with that process because maybe they don't think you're good enough parent or you're not doing it right. Maybe your parent is overbearing in your parenting, especially if you're a young parent. And it takes strength and courage to stand by your own values of what you think parenting is, and not allow someone else's values to take over what you think is good parenting.
I love what you said about it being a process. I think about, when people think about wanting to be a parent and they just remember seeing that cute little Gerber baby and having that moment. And for you to say it's a process and understanding that it's going to be
this is a conversation.
And so it's a process, and there's going to be some growing pains that go with it. I think it's so important for us to remember, but also remembering, what is in my control. So when someone else is interfering in a custody way, there may be some things that I'm in control of and I can work with, but there may be a lot of things that are not in my control. And so being able to forgive myself and not hold it against myself because there were some things that were outside of my control is going to be very important if you have someone interfering with you being able to form a loving relationship with a child.
Dr. Mattox, I believe you're on mute.
Dr. Mattox is trying to model for us how complicated relationships work because she is in a complicated relationship with her internet today. So she is showing us how you persevere in the middle of complication.
Absolutely. So I think that for me, in trying to understand how to process Mother's Day for myself, because it is very complicated. You know, like I said, I lost my mother. There have been times where I have strongly considered motherhood, and frequently being asked the question of what you're going to do for Mother's Day, or someone saying Happy Mother's Day, to me is, it's almost like a little sting, if that makes sense. It's like, I don't know what to say to them in this situation, or say I'm not a mom. And so frequently I just go and just accept it and say thank you, and keep it moving, because I don't want to spend too much energy in that space. I have not always coped well with Mother's Day. I generally will work every Mother's Day weekend, so that it gives me this time to not think about it as much, because I have had times where I have not worked and I have stayed in the bed, and that was what I needed in those moments. But I also know that I like to be busy, and that helps me to get through the days as well. And this will be my last year of working Mother's Day, because I'm transitioning out of the job that I do that with. And I have reflected back on the years of how well patients have helped me during Mother's Day as well. They always give me a little gem. Last year, one told me, I can tell that you're grieving. I had said nothing about it at all, but something of them, they knew that I was not doing well. And so he said, I can tell that you're grieving. And I just want you to know that the energy that your mom had is now in the sun, and is she's shining on you every day. And I had not thought it, I had never heard of that before, but it was such a blessing to me. And so I'm thankful. I have not always operated well on Mother's Day, but I operated as well as I could. And I will continue to as well.
I think that's so important. And when you were talking earlier about um, that it changes year to year, and I remember the first year being very like, I'm going to extend myself some grace. I'm not going to push myself. And then that second year, I was like, okay, you should be ready to roll. You didn't been through the first year. And so
Mhm.
I went full force back into church. And all the time that I went to church, people were handing out roses. And they were handing out roses to everybody. And then there was a big thing. And by the end of like the beginning of service, I was like tears brimming on my eyes, like trying not to cry. And I was like, oh, my healing is not going to look like I'm going to get through this day without crying.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry at some
Yeah.
point every Mother's Day weekend. So, what is my healing going to look like? It's going to look like me accepting that this is a complicated relationship. I am
Mhm.
extremely happy about the other mothers in my life who have stepped up and surrounded me with love. And I also miss my biological mother who also loved me for so many years. And
Yeah.
I'm going to honor both of those spaces. I'm going to be smiling with people who are excited. I'm going to rejoice with those who rejoice. And then I'm going to grieve and mourn my loss as well. And so that's what my healing had to look like. But my ability to cope with that changes based on other stuff. Like 2020, I wasn't good at that. Last year was a little bit better. This year may not be as good. You just have to figure out where you're at.
Absolutely.
And tears are not terrorists. Welcome them. They can be therapeutic. Allow them. Um, Jalatifa, I saw that you were about to say something. Please jump right in.
Yeah, I was going to say I have a bit of a twist on the Mother's Day for me as a person, because I'm going through a transition of my identity for so long has been so entrenched in motherhood. And my children are now adults and they have their own lives and they visit barely or when they want to. And I can't hold them to spending time with me all the time as much as I would want to see them. But it's more on me that I really need to think about what are my other identities? What are my other identities? And what can I expand onto as I experience the loss of my identity on this hands on helicopter mother um, that is has changed now?
That is so huge about those identities. I know so many women who are going through the exact same thing where now motherhood looks different. whether your child is going off to college or in the military or starting their own family, and having to deal with what am I going to do now that I don't have like this teenager that I'm on them every morning and saying, hey, get up, get up, get up, do this, do that. What do I do now? And it can make your Mother's Day difficult because you don't really know where you fit right now. You haven't taken that time. So having that opportunity to explore what are your other identities, I think can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I also just think we should hold space for some of those kids, some of the children who are dealing with parents who may not be well. And we've been talking about emotional wellness, but even physical wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So, those who are dealing with a chronic illness and they're having to be caregivers, those who are dealing with parents who have dementia, and so they may be physically here, but not mentally back where they were or what they remember, and how difficult that caregiving can be. And Mother's Day becomes even more complicated because
Mm-hmm.
those messages of, well, at least they're still here, but they're not here in the way that they used to be. So you're grieving that relationship you had before and now moving into what you have now. So those identities changing for the mother, but sometimes they change for the child too, and how you can relate and what your relationship is with your parent.
I just want to piggyback off of that. When you said holding space for those children that have different experiences, it brought to mind parentified children, children that learn through their experiences that they can't trust the adults that around them to make good decisions for them, and so they're looking at themselves to make those decisions and really parenting themselves through life. um, I think it's especially important to hold space for those children because they have difficulties in different spaces in which they are supposed to look to adults um, for direction, like in school or in work, or, because they have been parentified, that ability to trust adults to make good decisions for them is not there. And so I think we should hold space for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point. I love that. And we don't think about that often. And when those children who are parentified, those are likely, people who are the children of people who are substance abusers, perhaps people who have abused alcohol, people who have mental health issues or physical health issues. So that is a really, really good point. And many times they are rewarded for being that way at home. But when they go to school and they take those same characteristics with them, they can be penalized for it. So those are really, really good points. Now, as we are about to wrap up, there are some things that you did not get a chance to say, and I want to give you an opportunity to share um, the remarks that you like to make to someone who's struggling this Mother's Day season, and resources that they might use to get better, or to feel better, or to be well. And I will start with you, Dr. Haynes.
So I think I got to say everything I wanted to say, but I do want to just remind everyone who's listening to this today is that it is okay if Mother's Day is not a happy day for you. You are not alone. There are
Mm-hmm.
many, many of us who have complicated relationships with Mother's Day. You are not by yourself. So if you think you're the only one that's crying and the only one that's a little anxious this week or a little out of sorts this week, you are not. You're not alone. And if you do need some support with that, they don't really have good support groups for people who struggle with Mother's Day. But I would use the same resources that I talk about when I'm saying any type of emotional wellness issue. So please make sure that you are in contact with your local NAMI office, which is National Alliance for Mental Illness, for resources on how to connect with mental health services in your area. But also those self-care things that you can do. So maybe this is a good time to buy a journal. Maybe this is a good time to think about what is it that I like to do and I enjoy doing that can bring me peace and joy. What are those people that I need around me that can be supportive in this time? So really thinking through what's your plan for support right now, what can be helpful.
I agree with that. I also liked your thoughts
Great
about
points.
not allowing yourself more than just Mother's Day to grieve, like you said, sometimes coming up. Because the sadness or the grief or the complicated thoughts don't stop at midnight on Monday morning after Mother's Day. They might continue for the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks. And so give yourself that space to feel how you're feeling for this time, for this month, if it takes that amount of time. My favorite way of coping and the resources that I always tell people to do is to go outside and go for a walk. I think that moving our bodies is one of the best ways that we can take care of ourselves. You don't have to go outside and run. You don't have to do even a jog. If you want to just sit outside on the porch, I just want you to get fresh air. That's one of the most important ways to take care of ourselves. If you ever want a therapist or someone to talk to, I think that the NAMI resource is also amazing. Another one is psychologytoday.com. And then a third one would be Therapy for Black Girls. Therapy for Black Girls is also a podcast, and they actually have an episode out right now about the complicated feelings that can occur on Mother's Day. So that might be a good read for someone to listen to.
I agree. I guess what I would like to add as a final thought is just taking care of yourself and honoring your feelings around motherhood or whatever else you're feeling anxious about or sad about or depressed about. Just honoring those feelings and taking care of yourself and know that you are worthy of being supported and taking time for yourself, that it's okay to be able to do that. And I also want to say, since the day isn't here yet and it's coming up, one of the things that I like to share with people is to maybe take a self care bag with you. You know, I carry lavender around with me because it's a very calming essential oil to me. And when I'm going into a stressful situation or a stressful situation happens, it helps just calm me down, and be able to think better. So think about what your comfort items are. What are some things that comfort you? And make sure that you have them available when you know that you're going to go through a rough time. And if Mother's Day is a rough time for you, prepare for that, prepare for that, and get those things that comfort you and make you feel better and focus on you.
I love the idea of a self care bag. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Me too. I'm about to put some stuff in my purse for Sunday. So you give me some ideas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you might need to get a bigger purse. I want to uh, to make sure the care is. So I'm jumping in because as we know, we just say Dr. Maddox has had some difficulties today, and maybe that is a bit of irony for this program because we know that those relationships that we have with our parents, sometimes with our siblings, with our family members, don't always go as smoothly as we'd like them to. And so we have to continue to be able to navigate those waters in order to make sure that we still are able to function at a high level. So I want to just say thank you. As someone that does have a complicated relationship with his mother, you know. And I appreciate what you were saying earlier about sometimes you just got to tell them, no, you weren't that good, right? And I understand good is a baseline of good. Yes, you fed us, you clothed us, you we had a stable living environment, but that doesn't qualify as good in certain instances. And so we have to recognize um, there are kind of different definitions when it comes to what is good parenting, what is good, a good relationship, and but the last thing I will say is and hopefully we can get Dr. Rhonda back here is what's been important for me as a parent is not carrying that baggage forward, right? And so if I've got a challenging relationship with a parent, I cannot in turn bring that and create that bring that same baggage to the relationship I have with my children. And because that's how we get those generational curses that continue to go forward. So we can't teach our children because they're learning from us. And so I learned some very bad habits, and I had to do some self-searching and some counseling and all of that stuff, so I wouldn't carry it forward to my children, so they could live and be the best people that I hope that they can be. And so we when we're thinking about those complicated relationships, I think it's important for us to recognize that we cannot let them continue and fester. Deal with yourself, find some self awareness, get that counseling, so therefore it doesn't impact your children.
Yes. Yes. I also think that, coming from a perspective of someone who does a lot of parenting skills teaching and parent coaching, like what is good enough parenting, right? What is
Right.
good enough parenting? Because we're all imperfect human beings. We all make mistakes that, whether they were intended or, unintended consequences of mistakes that may impact someone that we love. And that isn't our intention, is not to hurt or to fail at parenting, but the perception from the person that you're giving that love to may be that you failed at that you got a big F. And understanding that what is good enough, because good enough parenting is based on the perception of the person that's receiving it.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't come with an instruction manual. When you have that child, I was looking for mine. I didn't get mine. It wasn't. I must have got a secondhand child because I didn't get the instructions. I didn't get none of that. I just got the it is, and there's nothing that prepares you for that. You think that you're prepared because we did the classes, and I thought I was all well, fine, and good. And then you realize the things that are ingrained in you. You don't realize it until you have a child, right? And so,
Mhm.
because in my head, I was like, "Woo! I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna be that." And then you have a child, and unless you are actively working against that, automatic pilot again. And I found myself saying some of the same things that I didn't like hearing from her. I
Mm.
found myself saying the same thing to my children. And it was a moment, I had a cathartic moment with one of my children. And I said, you know what? I got to do things differently. And that was kind of set our relationships on a different path, was that, but you have to be willing to listen, and you have to be willing to recognize and do some self-assessment in terms of, where your blind spots are. So we've been trying. I think I'm gonna try to bring it back one more time.
Thank you, thank
There
you,
it
thank you for a wonderful session. Thank you, Dr. Haynes. I know you have to go, so bye bye. Thank you, all of those who are tuning in and listening for a great show. The weather in here has been awful, and I've not been able to participate as much as I'd like. But thank you all for staying. Thank you, Dr. Reed. Thank you, Miss Jo Myers, for a wonderful show and for such golden nuggets. Family, and always, I want to thank you for being loyal listeners and tuning in each and every Thursday, a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time and 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye bye.